It was the summer of 1881, and the air in Upper Egypt was so hot, it felt like it was on the verge of combustion. You were following a guide, searching through a pile of rubble for a legendary entrance. There is no magnificent stone gate, no mystical curses, just an inconspicuous black hole in a rocky crevice, a vertical shaft dropping 12 meters deep. The place looks like an abandoned mine pit used for dumping trash. You slide down a rope, the air thick with the smell of stale dust. You have to crawl on your stomach, shimmying like a lizard into a low tunnel. Just as you were about to scream from a sudden onset of claustrophobia, the faint light of a candle illuminates what lies ahead. At that moment, your brain simply crashes. Blocking your path is a coffin, then another, and another. Dozens of sarcophagi are piled haphazardly like express delivery parcels, cluttering this narrow rat hole. The ground is littered with scattered blue shabti figurines, canopic jars meant to hold internal organs, and even dried flower garlands from 3,000 years ago. You lean in to read the names on the coffins, and cold sweat instantly breaks out. Thutmose III, the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. Seti I, the most perfect builder. Ramesses II, the man who lived as a god. This is the most illogical part of the whole affair. These men once ruled a vast empire stretching from Damascus to Khartoum. In life, they possessed the wealth of the entire ancient world. In death, they were supposed to lie in the heavily guarded imperial tombs of the Valley of the Kings, enjoying eternal tranquility. Why were they crowded together like a group of refugees fleeing a disaster, stuffed into this nameless, broken well? This was not a normal archaeological discovery. It was a massive crime scene. To solve this riddle, we must expose a truth even darker than grave robbing itself. A perfect scam orchestrated by the state machine, lasting for a century. First, you have to understand what the Valley of the Kings actually was. The ancient Egyptians called it the great and noble necropolis of millions of years. Located on the west bank of the Nile, backed by a natural pyramid-shaped mountain peak, it was not only a spiritual sanctuary, but a military restricted zone. During the 500 years of the New Kingdom, to protect the pharaoh's physical body, the key to resurrection, Egyptian security was taken to the extreme. Terrain lockdown. The site is a closed, dry river valley with only one way in and out. 24/7 surveillance. The cliffs were guarded around the clock by the Medjai special police. Let alone a human, even a stray dog would be spotted. They would even listen for the faint sound of copper chisels striking rock.
Now turn slowly.
Closed management. The artisans who built the tombs lived in a sealed village. The gates were locked, and everyone was searched upon entry and exit. Under such a security system, ordinary tomb raiders didn't stand a chance. Although historical records do show sporadic looting, for instance, Tutankhamun's tomb was visited by thieves twice, but they only dared to swipe some scented oils and gold rings near the entrance. And Amenhotep III's in-laws had their tomb accidentally entered by road workers. But this was petty theft. You have to realize that for a pharaoh of Ramses' level, burial goods were gold calculated in tons. To empty these things out, strip the mummy bare, and transport the corpse kilometers away to a hiding spot, that is absolutely not a job a few petty thieves could pull off under the cover of darkness. This leads to our core question. If outside thieves couldn't get in, where did the stuff go? Let's drag the timeline to around 1100 BC, during the reigns of Ramses IX through 11th. At this time, the sky was falling on Egypt. The Nile failed to flood, crops failed, and prices skyrocketed. When the living were starving to death, the dead wearing gold and silver became a form of original sin. We can now read the interrogation records left from that period, the Abbott Papyrus and the Mayor B Papyrus. These case files from thousands of years ago record the tragic collapse of social order. Listen to the confession of a captured stonemason. It is extremely explicit. We opened their sarcophagi. We found the noble mummy of this king, equipped like a warrior. A large number of amulets and ornaments of gold were at his neck. His head mask of gold was on him. The noble mummy of this king was completely covered with gold. We stripped off the gold. We set fire to their inner coffins. Notice the detail, set fire. To quickly remove the gold ornaments from the coffins, the thieves lit fires directly inside the tomb chambers to melt the gold and take it away. This wasn't theft anymore. This was violent robbery. But even so, it still doesn't add up. Common bandits only want wealth. They grab the gold and run. They would never be idle enough to carry dozens of pharaonic corpses out and find them a new home. There must have been a more powerful force at play. The true mastermind surfaced at the end of Ramesses XI's reign. By this time, the pharaoh was a puppet. Real power in Thebes was in the hands of the high priest of Amun, Pi, or Piank. This guy was facing a dead end. The Nubian general in the south had rebelled. Pi needed to fight a war, and he needed a massive military budget. But the national treasury didn't have a single copper coin. Where was the money? The money was buried in the valley behind them. So the high priest issued a suffocating order. Of course, the official narrative was beautifully phrased. It was called the Wehem Mezut, repetition of births, Renaissance. The excuse was, the bandits are too rampant. To protect the sacred bodies of our ancestors, we must open the tombs and transfer the pharaohs to a safer place. Listen to that. How touching. But in reality, this was a legal search warrant. The key figure executing this mission was the scribe of the necropolis, Hammon. This man was essentially an outlaw. Archaeologists have found over 130 pieces of graffiti left by him in the Valley of the Kings. These scribbles weren't for commemoration. They were casing marks. He even arrogantly gave himself a title, Opener of the Gates of the Underworld. Under Hammon's command, an official salvage team entered the Valley of the Kings. This wasn't petty theft. This was demolition. Scraping the earth. Gold masks? Taken. Amulets? Taken. Even the thin layer of gold leaf on the giant wooden coffins was scraped clean by artisans with scrapers. Resource recycling. Cedar planks, linen, and imported essential oils from recently buried tombs were all hauled back to the treasury for reuse. Violent dismantling. The cruelest part was the treatment of the mummies. To get to the jewels deep within the wrappings, like the heart scarab, workers used adzes, axes. Later CT scans showed that many pharaohs had their arms chopped off, chests split open, and even heads twisted off. All the handiwork of official artisans trying to retrieve rings and necklaces. This looting spree lasted for a full century. After the Valley of the Kings was emptied, they didn't even spare the tombs of other nobles. The evidence is undeniable. Large amounts of jewelry unearthed in the tombs of later 21st dynasty pharaohs were clearly recycled goods. There was even a pharaoh who was buried in someone else's old stone sarcophagus, with the name only hastily altered. Now, we can finally explain that eerie scene from the beginning. When all the gold and treasure had been confiscated, what was to be done with the remaining dried corpses? Throw them away? No, that's blasphemy. the people would revolt. Keep them? There was nowhere to put them, as the original tombs had been trashed. So, the high priests performed an extremely perfunctory cleanup job. They found some old coffins, or even coffins originally belonging to others, and shoved the pharaohs' bodies in haphazardly, often putting the wrong body in the wrong box. Then, under the cover of night, they transferred these dozens of once mighty emperors like a pile of cargo into a few extremely hidden locations. The largest of these hiding spots was the royal cache at Deir el-Bahari, known as DB 320. This is why, in the summer of 1881, when the expedition team crawled into that cave, they saw a scene resembling a refugee camp. Those withered flower garlands were likely placed there in a rush by a priest who still held a shred of reverence during the final transfer. It was a final farewell to a glorious era. It is a massive piece of dark humor. The pharaohs exhausted the nation's strength to build indestructible tombs, using spells and traps to protect themselves, attempting to take their wealth into the afterlife. But in the end, it was precisely that wealth that attracted their most trusted guardians, turning their eternal resting places into slaughterhouses. Even more interesting is this. The stolen gold was long ago melted down and minted into coins, circulating through the hands of Roman soldiers, Arab caravans, and modern bank vaults, unrecognizable. Conversely, these mummies, stripped naked and stuffed into the bottom of a well like trash, miraculously survived to this day, precisely because they had lost their value, dodging the greed of tomb raiders for thousands of years. Today, any tourist visiting Luxor can descend into those empty tombs in the Valley of the Kings and listen to the echo of their own footsteps. It was once piled high with treasure. Now, only stones and murals remain. Perhaps this is the harshest lesson history has taught us. Everything you try to take with you will eventually destroy you. Yet the empty shell you leave behind may surprisingly become eternal.